So the downside of smoothing resource demands is that there is a loss of flexibility that occurs from reducing slack. Slack is there to give you flexibility, right, in a project. So if you reduce slack, you're going to reduce that flexibility. In resource-constrained projects, resources are limited in quantity as well as in availability, or both. Activities are scheduled using rules of thumb called heuristics by following the priority rules. Activities are scheduled to have minimum slack, the smallest or the least duration, and these two are important for resource-constrained project activities. A parallel method is an iterative process. A parallel method starts from the beginning of the project time, and when the resources exceed the resources available, then you use priority rules, and that is called a parallel method. And the parallel method is used to apply those kind of heuristics that we are talking about for resource-constrained projects. The impacts of resource-constrained scheduling is that it reduces slack, therefore it reduces flexibility. It increases the number of critical and near critical activities. It increases scheduling complexity because resource constraints are added to technical constraints. May make the traditional critical path no longer meaningful. Very unlikely, but it can happen. Can break the sequence and leave the network with a set of disjointed critical activities. If you are not careful in resource constraint scheduling, this can happen. But you got to be careful using the right methods or right heuristics. May cause parallel activities to become sequential if you're not careful with that. And it can change activities from critical to non-critical because you're losing the resources. That means it's going to take a longer period of time, and longer period of time means that something else can be critical, or some other activity can become critical. Splitting tasks is a no-no. You don't want to do that. We talked about it before. This is a scheduling technique used to get better project schedule or to increase resource utilization. And you don't want to do that, since by statistically they say that this is one of the major reasons why projects fail to meet schedule. So basically what you're doing is you have an activity. And let's say you split into 3 segments, A, B, C, here, like here. So what is happening is between A and B, after A, or even before A, you take the resources and put them somewhere else. So basically you're shutting down activity A, and then again you need to start up activity A. Similarly for activity B also. Whenever you shut down and start up this activity, you might have more risks. You might have more problems. You might encounter more and more problems. If the resources, once you send them to another place, they may not come back. You may not have the right resources, so you'll be hanging with activity A for a long time without completing this whole thing. So splitting activities is not recommended at all. Benefits of scheduling resources is that it leaves time for considering other reasonable alternatives. For instance, cost time trade offs, or if you want to change in priorities of the activities. It provides the information needed to prepare time phased work, basically to gauge the impact of unforeseen events, to assess how much flexibility you have over certain resources. So, scheduling resources is very, very important, of course. Assigning project work. The reason why we should not always assign the best people the most difficult tasks. That was the reason. The best people resent to the fact that they're always given the toughest assignments, and the less experienced participants resent to the fact that they are never given the opportunity to expand their knowledge base. So actually it is much better if you have the best people working alongside of less experienced participants so that they gain their experience, and after that you use those newly experienced participants more and more. Factors to be considered in deciding who should work together are minimize unnecessary tension. People should complement each other in work teams. Veterans team up with new hires for new experience, like we talked about before. And people work together so that you can have people work together early on so they can become familiar with each other, so they become friends and become easy for them to work together more and more. In a multi-project resource scheduling, there are problems that can happen. One is that an overall schedule slippage can happen. So if you share resources, it can create a problem of not having enough resources in one activity, and that can create a ripple effect. That means delays from one project can create delays in other projects as well. So not only you won't be successful with one project, you'll be unsuccessful with all the other projects as well. So we need to understand these problems really well, especially when your company has multi-projects, a lot of projects, and resources are shared. And you could have inefficient resource utilization because different schedules require different people, different requirements. And when you're having multiple projects, to allocate these resources from one to another is a complex nature, simply because you might need more time to finish an activity, and that means you are holding the resource for a longer period of time. But then some other project where this resource is actually dependent on is getting hampered by that, right? And you could have some bottlenecks in resources as well. So when you're managing multi-projects, scheduling is of importance and you got to be very careful. You create project offices. PMO is a great place to work with. You need to have a project management office. Or this office can oversee the scheduling of resources across multiple projects. They are independent from project teams, so they can have a critical view of all the projects. They're not biased towards certain projects. Hopefully, you don't want to be when you're in a PMO. And then you can use a project priority queuing system, first come, first serve basis. You treat individual projects as part of one big project and then adapt all the same heuristics, same requirements, same conditions, same constraints as far as resources are concerned, to this mega project. You need to use a good project management software like Microsoft project is a project management software which is being used in many companies. Outsource projects to reduce the number of projects managing internally is a good step sometimes. Outsourcing projects gives you not only the time that you need for your projects to prosper or to progress or to complete, but also the enough resources inside your company to be working for your projects. And you can get the needed, required expertise from outsourced projects from somewhere else. Or you can hire temporary workers to expedite certain activities that are falling behind schedule. However, this is costly. Contract project work during peak periods is often used when there are insufficient internal resources to meet the demands of the project. This is basically using outside contractors, or you can go outsource. So, you need to develop a project cost baseline. Like we talked about before, this is going to be the foundation. This is going to be the anchor point of all your costs. So as the project progresses, you're going to be comparing the cost and the time taken against this to see how much progress you're doing, how well you're doing in progress. So to determine if the project is on or ahead or behind schedule, or whether it is over or under its budget cost, you need to have a good project cost baseline. In order to assess how much work has been accomplished, or to use what is called an earned value analysis, you need to have a project baseline. To create a time-based budget, you need to assign each work package to one responsible person or a department, as well as the deliverables. You need to compare the planned schedule and cost using this EVA or earned value analysis.